To know more such amazing stories from Indian history, click the bell icon and subscribe to Live History India.
Hey, this is a story you rarely come across. Duleep Singh, the young boy who gave away his crown and also gave away the Kohinoor. This week, we retrace the story of Maharaja Ranjit Singh's son through the eyes of Peter Barnes, his biographer, who tells the story of this tragic prince.
This young boy, all of 14, would go on to be one of the most tragic figures of 19th century India. By the time this portrait was done in 1852, Duleep Singh, son of Maharaja Ranjit Singh, the man described as Sher-e-Punjab or Lion of Punjab, had already sat on the throne for 9 years. But he was no more than a puppet. His mother, Jind Kaur, was the regent and the British the masters. Duleep Singh was just 10 years old when he lost his kingdom. He would appear only in passing reference in the subcontinent's history as a tragic figure who lost his kingdom, his mother, his wealth, and his religion. He is also famous as someone who gave away the diamond Kohinoor. By 1854, he was exiled to England, where he lived a life of a Victorian gentleman. Locally, he was referred to as the Black Prince of Perthshire. But in 1893, he died unsung, with his story forgotten. By the 1990s, even the locals in Suffolk, where he lived, had little memory of him. So, it was quite a task for British Asian author and archivist Peter Barnes to piece together Duleep Singh's story. Barnes worked extensively collecting documents and memorabilia on the life of Maharaja Duleep Singh, and in 2009 he authored the book Sovereign, Squire and Rebel, Maharaja Duleep Singh and the Heirs of a Lost Kingdom. Peter spoke to us about how he rediscovered the fascinating life story of this forgotten prince.
My personal interest started way back in the 1990s in the life of Maharaja Duleep Singh. I was at university, and we went on a university trip to Suffolk. And I said to my colleagues, look, I'll have to stop at the graves of Maharaja Duleep Singh. It's something which I'd been told by my father. The general perception in the Sikh households was that there was this young prince who abandoned his countrymen, went off to England, became a Christian, and never looked back. And I went to see these graves with my friends, and I found out there was a museum in the local town which was dedicated to the prince and was even founded by his son. And all I can describe is 10 minutes later standing inside this shrine to the Maharaja's family. And I never knew he had any children, he had a wife. And that's when my journey began into discovering who this chap was, because there was no books on him, there was no literature on his family. So it was a sort of a real journey into him. I think I was very lucky at the time I came in. In the mid-90s, there were still people around who knew the Maharaja's children, his former colleagues and friends, and even people whose parents had worked for the Maharaja were still living in their 80s and 90s. And what I did was I placed a series of adverts in the local paper. So around 20, 30 adverts in the local paper over a period of 6 months. And I had something like 300 replies from former colleagues, employees, friends, and children of employees. I visited them all, I interviewed them, recorded many of them, and many of them had artifacts and memorabilia belonging to the Maharaja and his children. And some of them said, look, just take them, because it's of no use to us, and after us, our children will not appreciate it, so you can have them. Or some even said, look, how much do you want to offer me? So I ended up buying some of the artifacts. And now I hold probably one of the largest collections on the life of Maharaja Duleep Singh.
We know very little about Maharaja Duleep Singh's early days when he sat on Maharaja Ranjit Singh's golden throne at Lahore, the then capital of the Kingdom of Punjab. It was a period of wars and vicious intrigue in the Lahore court.
Well, when he's in Lahore, he was pretty much a minor prince up to the death of his half-brother, Maharaja Sher Singh. And in 1843, he comes to the throne of the Punjab, and that's when he's brought into prominence. People actually find out, yes, there is this seventh son of Maharaja Ranjit Singh. But sadly, after 2 years, we had the start of the Sikh Wars, which was played between his mother, Maharani Jind Kaur, and Jawahar Singh, which obviously was the Prime Minister. So his life was very turbulent in those days in Lahore as a Maharaja. And there was only stability once Sir John Logan, who became his guardian, a British officer in the Indian Army, became his father-like figure. And it was Sir John's duty to bring up the Maharaja as a young, you could say young Englishman. He took him to Uttar Pradesh, took him to Fatehgarh cantonment, where he was surrounded by the children of serving officers. All contact with his countrymen was cut off. The Bible was placed in his hands, and he genuinely started showing an interest in the Christian religion. But I think he'd found his own at that point, because those turbulent years of Lahore, which were quite a painful memory. I mean, seeing his uncle being murdered in front of him and his various half-brothers assassinated and killed. So this was a period of his life where there was something, which he had something to look forward to. And his studies was something he was really enjoying in those years. Earliest recollection of his mother was he was about 9 years old. She was arrested in 1847. And around the 1860s, around 1861, he had an urge to meet his mother. He was a young man by now, he was around 23. And he sent a letter via a native traveling banker who was visiting England, and he sent a letter to her, with him, and said, "Can you get this to my mother? She's now living in Nepal." The letter was intercepted by British intelligence. But by now the British felt the Maharani was old, she was frail, and she was virtually blind. And they thought, look, there's no issue in the mother and son meeting, so let's give them permission. So for the first time, Duleep Singh was allowed to go back to India, not allowed to go to the Punjab, so he was allowed to go to Calcutta, and he met his mother after a period of 13 and a half years. The story goes that she sees him, I mean, she was virtually blind, and one anecdote came out, which is that when he fell to her feet, she placed her hand on his head and said, like, "Where's your hair gone? Where's your kiss? You're the son of the great Ranjit." And I think he felt very little at that time, that, look who I was and look what I've become. And I think that was a big turning point in his life. His mother came back with him to London, and that's when he started delving into himself, into what he was and where he'd come from.
One of the most controversial incidents in Indian colonial history is the gifting of the Kohinoor Diamond by young Duleep Singh to Queen Victoria, following the annexation of Punjab in 1849. Peter tells us what actually happened at the time and the truth behind the story.
According to the Treaty of Annexation of 1849, the Kohinoor Diamond was surrendered to the British East India Company under Lord Dalhousie, and this was later presented by the East India Company to Queen Victoria. And the story goes, in 1854, back in London, when Duleep Singh arrived and had an audience with the Queen, she wanted to know his reaction to the Kohinoor Diamond. Would he want to see it again? So she inquired with Lady Logan, because she was painting this fabulous portrait of Duleep Singh by Winterhalter, that at the next sitting, would Duleep Singh be willing, or would he be wanting to see the Kohinoor Diamond? And Lady Logan said, "I don't see a problem. Let's bring the Kohinoor out and we'll show it to him." And so on a particular sitting, she has the Kohinoor brought out from the Tower of London, and she shows it to Duleep Singh, and he picks it up, he takes it to the window, looks at the light shining through the diamond, and he turns around and he says to the Queen, "To humble Majesty, I present the Kohinoor Diamond." So that's where the gift bit came in. And obviously when Lord Dalhousie heard about this, he went absolutely mad. He said, "Who the heck is Duleep Singh to present the diamond to Queen Victoria? I'm the one who won this diamond for the crown. I'm the one, I'm the victor." So the story, obviously, we do say that it was gifted, but it was more like it was surrendered. It was part of the treasury of Ranjit Singh, and it was surrendered to the East India Company.
With Queen Victoria as his godmother, Maharaja Duleep Singh lived a life of a wealthy English aristocrat at his country estate, the Elvedon Hall in Suffolk in England. But his past would soon draw him back to his roots.
He tried his best to integrate. His best friend was the Prince of Wales, so obviously he had the best of the companies. He was a fine shot, so hunting was the main sport at that time, the gentleman's sport. He was one of the best shots in the country, and he threw the most magnificent hunting parties, partridge shooting, rabbits, hares, pheasants, you name it. And the whole reason he bought Elvedon because it was one of the best estates for gamekeeping. And he even had a Scottish castle which was had great moors for partridge shooting and grouse shooting. And although he tried his best and he was invited to every party of the day, I think there was some some prejudice towards him. I mean, he was referred to as the Black Prince. Obviously, in today's culture, we would find that quite racist. I don't know if we call it racist at that time, but I think it was more ignorance and people were quite naive. But because of his title and who he was, I think he was held in quite high esteem. Because Duleep Singh was living this very privileged life in England, he didn't upset his system. He just went along with the East India Company. It's only when he had a family, when he had a wife and children, that he found out bringing up a royal household on the income that he was given and not promised was falling short. And interestingly, in 1882, his cousin visited him in London, and he brought to him this really fascinating information, which is that the Maharaja's personal family assets and property were illegally annexed with state property. So this was property which had belonged to Ranjit Singh and his forefathers well before Ranjit Singh had come to the throne of the Punjab. So this was their personal family possessions. So when the Maharaja made demand for these now, all hell broke loose, and he asked for a retrial. He was flatly refused again, and this is around 1884. And that's when he decided, that's it, I'm packing my bags, I'm taking my family, and I'm heading back to India. But when the Duleep Singh ship docked at Aden, which was the halfway point at that time, because we used to go by ship at that time, and the British resident at Aden came upon board, and he told the Maharaja, for the security of the empire, he could not proceed to India. And if he did, he would be arrested. So he was held under virtual house arrest in Aden. To save his face, and the shame of it all, he sent his wife and his children back to England. And he stayed in Aden himself to make that one last stand against the British Empire. And amongst those first acts of defiance, we can say, is that he called upon his cousin, Thakur Singh, not Sandawaliya, but another cousin from his mother's side, to visit him with some Sikhs in Aden, so he would be reinitiated into the Sikh faith.
As his biographer, Peter Barnes has a somber assessment of the life of Maharaja Duleep Singh.
The best word that sums it all up is tragic, because his whole life was just tragic. He was controlled from day one, either by his maternal uncle Jawad Singh or by his mother Jind Kaur, by the establishment. And then obviously when he led the rebellion, we had the French, the Fenians, the Russians. Everybody wanted to use this man as a puppet for their own gains. So he was pulled from one end to the other. And a man who was destined to be the ruler of one of the greatest empires in northern India, one of the richest empires, the son of the great Sher-e-Punjab, Maharaja Ranjit Singh. And he dies all alone in a shabby hotel room, penniless, in Paris, with nobody by his side.
Today, Maharaja Duleep Singh's story is seeing a revival, especially among the British Punjabis, who see him as an important part of the British Asian heritage. Hopefully, Indians will remember him too, more than just as the boy who gave away the Kohinoor.